Well, it's now time for brainstorming the human connection. And it's brought to you by the South Dakota Humanities Council. My name is Lawrence Diggs, and we will be talking about creativity today, I think. That's what we're planning to talk about today. This is an interactive program. I try to remind myself, to remind all of you, that this is an interactive program. And what that means is that it depends on everybody's contribution. I'm one of those people who believe in the wisdom of crowds, and that is all of us will be always smarter than any one of us. And so the more of us that get involved in a subject, start thinking about a subject, trading ideas, etc., on a subject, the more we will have new ideas that come out of it. Speaking of creativity, it's all of us putting in kind of like a potluck. It's like more of us get things, ideas to contribute and bounce ideas off of each other. So we encourage all of you to join us, ask questions, give some of your insights and experiences in about whatever subject we're talking about today. It will be about a unique program that seeks to encourage and foster creativity in young people. Today, we have our guest is Valeria Wicker, and I'm going to let Valerie talk about herself. I always feel like, well, I can start, telling about people, but they have, rather than me hearing it from them and then telling you, it seems always more reasonable if they just tell you in their own words, and that way you can get a sense of not only who they are, where they come from, but their perspective about what that is, as opposed to my perspective. So Valerie, welcome to our program. And we look forward to sharing some ideas with you and learning more about the kinds of things that you're doing with young people over at LSS, Lutheran Social Services.
Yeah.
Can you first tell us where you came from, where you grew up, and, all the fights you had with your brothers and sisters and all of that?
Well, I'm originally from Central Ohio. I grew up outside of Columbus, and I was raised by my grandparents, who were from southwestern Ohio. And they really pushed my brother and I to go to school and experience life outside of the state. They never meant never come back, but they just wanted us to see more of the world. And so I ended up going to Wellesley College, which is a women's college in Massachusetts. And I stayed there afterwards for a master's degree in teaching from Tufts University. And during my undergrad time, I also spent a year in southern Spain. And while I was there, I was often not seen as an American tourist or exchange student, but as an immigrant. And so it made me curious about the immigrant experience in Spain. And I ended up going back after my senior year and doing an internship with an immigrant association in a neighborhood of Madrid called Vallecas. And then I returned to Spain after some years of teaching and lived in the north of Spain in Bilbao. And then my teaching career brought me to South Dakota, and particularly to the Rosebud Reservation, where I lived there for 5.5 years. And a friend of mine had helped me to make connections there, the late Kevin Locke, which is how I met you. Lawrence was at his funeral.
Right.
And so after 5 or so years there, my husband and I moved to Sioux Falls, and I worked for the Wokini Initiative at SDSU, and then decided to stay within town and shorten my commute and do something I love, which is being the program supervisor at LSS. So I've been at LSS since November of 2022, which was around the time that the Multicultural Center merged with LSS.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that merger, because I don't think that's widely known. What happened there?
So the Multicultural Center of Sioux Falls was founded in 1997. It was an independent organization, and it was founded at a time that Sioux Falls was becoming more diverse, and there were social and systemic barriers, particularly for newcomers to Sioux Falls, that the Multicultural Center could address if LSS, who was resettling refugees, didn't have those services. So they started out, first of all, celebrating the increasing global culture of Sioux Falls, and having the Festival of Cultures. It's been around as long as the MCC has. And this year we celebrated our 27th year, but they've also had over the years after-school programs. They have offered Spanish classes to the community. There's a lot of people out there at different times when they're available who are enthusiastic about learning Spanish, so that they can speak to their friends and neighbors and coworkers. We've also had driver's education, and this is continuing with LSS and the Center for New Americans. There's English for driving classes that have been made possible through the Department of Public Safety, and and just a variety of different kinds of programming for all ages.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that one of those programs is called Outlast. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Outlast is the program that we had hosted the not-for-profit organization called Outlast. So we did this summer, from June 23rd to 28th, a youth film camp, and focused on visual poetry. It was made possible by the South Dakota Humanities Council, and Outlast facilitated the content of the program. So they are founded by Latarian McIntosh Officer. She was a teacher with Teach for America on Rosebud, and we overlapped a little bit, but before that, even with Outlast, she had started these camps at Thunder Valley on Pine Ridge, where they were working with youth to enhance their powers of expression through film, and to also explore how they see themselves portrayed in the media, and how they would like themselves represented. So that camp has been going on about for 7 years on Thunder Valley. Some of those that first cohort is they're going on to film school now. They're recording a film this summer, and like they've had casting calls and stuff. What we did in Sioux Falls was with a new cohort, and we started out really simple, but it had a very profound impact on the participants.
As I understand it, part of the I can say energy comes from trying to get young people to let's say sharpen their creativity, to become more comfortable with being creative, and to give them the space to exercise that creativity. Can you tell us about the struggle to, to get the young people to get to that place?
Yeah, well, with our camp, we had planned for 20, and I think just, in hindsight, we want to start the recruitment process a little earlier and involve Outlast in that as well, so that we can get those 20. Some were younger than high school age, and we were aiming for the ages between like 14 and 18. And so being able to have that flexibility to have like actually more interest than we have spaces for could be a possibility for for more growth in the future years.
Mm-hmm. So I would think that one of the problems is just getting people to know about what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about finding the kids putting together the kids who actually want to be creative, want to do that, and then you have this program on the other hand, and getting those people and programs hooked up are characteristically difficult. It's like if you have free money, somebody wants to give money, and then you have people who need money, but somehow they're both searching for each other, but can't find each other. So can you talk a little bit about the let's say the challenge to find those people and get them involved in something that could be beneficial to them? I think your voice went off. You got to turn your mic back on. Somehow when you move your camera, it went off. There you
Can
go.
you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think my video dropped for a moment from the call. So it's particularly a challenge with high schoolers because there is a lot of programming in place for middle schoolers and younger. So we found a good deal of the participants by partnering with the Boys and Girls Club. And they wanted to come, they were enthusiastic about it. Some of them, though, because we passed the message on to our partners, I think there was one kid who thought it was an acting workshop when it was focused more on film production, and so he was quite disappointed, and he ended up dropping out of the camp. But so messaging is important, and with high schoolers, they're not so much in regular everyday programs. High schoolers have all different types of circumstances going on, and so I think with them we have to focus on recruiting them through the one regular everyday program that all of them has, which is school. So and meet them at school.
Well, that's it's interesting you should mention that, because as I work with different organizations, not just in South Dakota, and California as well, it was a similar kind of let's say process. People wanted to work with young people, like from kindergarten up till about junior high school. And then it was kind of fade in junior high school. And by high school, there was a sense that we just don't understand these kids, and we don't know where they are. We don't know what they do. Where are the watering holes? There was like a complete disconnect with it from adults to those young people. And at the same time, the young people saying, well, we don't have anything to do, so let's go start a gang,
Yeah. They're more independent. They can oftentimes drive themselves. They can look after themselves. They have jobs, and sometimes even they're young parents, and so they're not they're not as likely to go to a structured program or congregate in one place at the direction of adults. But it doesn't mean that they're uninterested. They're just harder to find.
Right.
So
That's what.
And Outlast used to working with down to 12 years old. So we were just able to be flexible with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was, I just found it interesting, the struggle that you are having making that connection, and wondering if there isn't, some, not just advertising it earlier and in more places, but maybe even a different approach that our advertising and marketing techniques somehow doesn't cover. And I know that in the advertising business, that age group is a very prized demographic, but they also have a hard time reaching that. They do a better job than most people, but they
Yeah.
still have a hard time reaching those folks. But that's a very important age, and especially when we're talking about something like creativity, where you want to be able to give them the benefit of what have people done before, and then they can
Yeah.
pile on top of that whatever whatever they find interesting.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about the approach of Outlast. Let's assume that we find this magical group that come and they're ready to join, to try to learn new ways to be creative. What do the instructors bring to the table in terms of tools that these young people can use? And how do you get them to be more creative or encourage their creativity?
Yeah. So the Outlast team are film and television professionals and former film and television production professionals. So LT, for example, she comes from the art department part of film productions and has worked down in Atlanta and in California. And then part of the team also is Mato Wayuhi, who is an artist from Sioux Falls, and he is an actor. He went to UCLA for film school and has composed the music for Reservation Dogs. And then with joining them this year was Lauren Begay, and she's also a film professional. And so they come at it from different angles of highlighting that the participants have a chance to make their voice be heard through film, and really portray their reality, their hopes and aspirations, and do that for themselves rather than the lens of someone else focusing in on things that they think it's important for an audience to see. They also teach them about the use of the camera and different types of shots, like panning and close-up and dolly shots, and different types of techniques that they can use to tell a story or get a point across. And they, for this, the theme of this camp was visual poetry. So they took them through poetry with prompts so that they could first write poems that talked about their reality, what community is to them, what hope is to them, what home means for them, and then they took the same prompts and made a collective poem. So with a collective poem, that is then what they took and made 3 videos out of, with 3 production teams of 4 each, with a Outlast staff member.
those are very, I think, very instructive, those things that you're talking about. And I may want to come back to that depending on how you address this next question. But
Mhm.
I'm curious about the under the hood of being creative. What kinds of things, I mean, the tools and techniques, those are one thing, but it's kind
Yeah.
of like language. Language is a
Mhm.
tool and technique. But if you have nothing to
Mhm.
say, there's no point in having good language, and having good grammar and spelling if you have nothing to say. The question is, how do you discover, something you want to say? How do you find that fire that makes you want to create, to do
Mhm.
something, whether it's with film or sculpture or just moving your eyebrows around or whatever your thing is. How do
Yeah.
you get people to be even interested in that?
Mhm. Well, in my opinion, just um, having practiced and studied pedagogy and andragogy, which is adult education, um, adolescents and adults are a lot alike, in that they are more enthusiastic about learning something with a practical application. And so these participants, they were really excited about creating something that then could be shared, and that would exist. I mean, a lot of kids, their role models nowadays, among them can be any number of YouTubers, and so they really get enthusiastic about producing things.
Right. And I have noticed that too, that people want to create something where they can get some kudos. And really, in that sense, what they're looking for is the cheese at the end. But I'm actually talking about something more fundamental of like
Hmm.
finding that thing or that fire inside that makes you want to take a chance, you know,
Yeah.
lowering the how can you say, the resistance to trying something new. My experience is that if you're not willing to fail, and if you're afraid of failure, it's going to be really hard to be creative. And if the only thing you have in mind is doing something that someone gives you a pat on the back or a little tap on the head and gives you a nice smile or a paycheck, then that usually is a deterrent to
Hmm.
creativity, because
Yeah.
creativity involves risk and you let the other people catch up with you.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, how do you encourage that kind of exploration and freedom of thought and the search for something different or a different way to do something,
Hmm.
or just understanding, how do you guys approach that?
Well, the first day of the camp, Outlast spends a good amount of time, um, conveying to the workshop what the purpose of them being there is, and what the goals are, and they also spend a good amount of time just with just group bonding and team building. So then everyone feels safe to express themselves. They all got a little booklet, like a little craft journal that they could put stickers in and write their poetry, write down their thoughts. One thing that really got me, because I've taught middle school for a while now, and middle schoolers can be hesitant to share their expressions and things, but with this, like, the kids, when I'd come in, they would show me what they wrote, and they barely know me because I wasn't there the whole time, but they're just eager to share that. I think that those prompts give them some confidence, and they're like training wheels if you're new to poetry, that I can say what home is to me, or how my friends are in a lyrical way, and so then they start to add to it and make it their own.
I want to come back to this conversation because I think it's at the core of this whole conversation about creativity and how do we promote it, and maybe even the question is, do we really want people to be creative? Because we do a lot of things to keep people from being creative in the culture. But I want to open it up to our other esteemed guests if they have any questions about creativity or our topic today. Do you feel sufficiently, let's say, informed about what Outlast is trying to do? Maybe we could get into some more of that. Anybody have anything they want to add or subtract, or questions that you would like to ask? Don't all speak up at once. Well, while you're thinking of it, we'll go on. But please do, keep. Oh, there's Tara. Go ahead,
I was
Tara.
curious about if this is just like in a stationary place, or if it goes out, like broadens beyond that. Like I could have one of these workshops or something, not like a week-long thing, but if it was just like a day workshop for the kids in my library.
Mm-hmm. Well, Outlast, it takes quite a bit to launch a program for them, because they're coming from different parts of the country, and so they offer week-long workshops, 3-week ones, and then like a several weeks long after-school program.
One of the things I've seen, Tara, is that especially when you're trying to get people who are not really, let's say, in touch with their creativity, to become, in touch with it, to get in touch with it, it's kind of a low ramp, to most of the time. I mean, it's the old story of how do you tell a good boy? You throw him in the water, and if it floats, it's a good boy. If you could getting to that point sometimes needs to be a slow ramp. So having a one-day workshop can be a catalyst. There are those kind of programs, but probably most of them are like, well, especially for kids, the first day you're with them, you're not really saying anything. They're just checking you out. Whatever you're saying is completely just woo. And then once they decide, after they get together later and decide if they like you or not, or what they think about you, now you come back whatever program you have. So a one-day program, while possible, can be tricky. Can be tricky to put together.
Just introducing this whole, process of letting people know the start to finish, they wouldn't have to complete it, but it's interesting to me, and I really enjoy the giving them the journals to do that. That's one thing that I might do, like the whole junk journal with prompts and things like that. So over the course of the summer, having your weekly prompts of this week, in our junk journals, we're going to focus on, X, whatever X happens to be. But I think that journal, and then they can look back on that and see how it comes together over the course of the, summer too, by having those journals and having weekly prompts, and they can take them home and they can sit with them, that they work on them when they're in your space, but they have them to take with them, because not everybody's going to feel confident or comfortable in a space surrounded by their peers either, to explore that creativity, where if they can take it with them, it doesn't stay there, and that's something that's tangible that they can take with them and sit with it and, be alone with for their creativity, I think helps as well. That it's not something like, oh, here we are for an hour and you're all going to learn be creative either, that it comes from emotions, it comes from, the experiences and all of that, of how you in turn express that creativity, whether through painting, writing, filmmaking, how it ends up coming out. And you could start with just a color, like, let's talk about your color and expand upon that, and have them come up with something creative in their own form of creativity based on that color, I think would be beautiful. So I was just curious though, if it was like a mobile, workshop that went around to different things, but thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with groups of adolescents, it's really important to establish a trusted space, like where that's free of ridicule, so that then they start talking and sharing with each other, and then the dialogue doesn't always go through the adult in the room, and they're not looking for validation from the adult, but they can go through the creative process with each other.
One of the things that I found that's it's a little harder to do, and I don't know that I even can suggest a way to do it in a weekend, but one of the things I like to try to do with young people is get them comfortable with rejection, to get them comfortable with not just saying, oh, everybody in this room has to like me, but being okay with people don't like you, but you have to have your own moral compass about, well, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing something reasonable? Are you trying to be a good person and people don't see it? It's like, because many of the things that we think of as creative, they're almost always rejected, because nobody's done it before, and other people are uncomfortable with things that they have not seen before, mostly because the brain doesn't quite know what to do with this new material yet. It doesn't have a filing system for it. And so if we only make them, if they can only create in a space where people will, just sort of pat them on the head, I think you cheat them, and because then you're forced to live in a bubble. You can't explore, you can't discover, because you're crippled with the need to have someone pat you on the head and give you approval. Most of creativity happens outside of that circle, so whether it's science, art, philosophy, pick a subject where people were on the cutting edge, and a lot of them got burned at the stake for saying, hey, I think this earth goes around the sun, very creative approach, but you're not always going to be liked, so, but some of those guys said, hey, burn me at the stake, but it's not going to make the sun go around the earth. You'll just be, and I'll be dead and you'll still be stupid. So I'd like to explore how we might get people to be more comfortable with trying something different, giving people permission to be creative. How, anybody have any ideas about how we might do that?
I appreciate you saying that, and that whole criticism, and I struggle with that line of being a parent and your child does a piece of art, and, they're looking for like, oh wow, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. But then, like my mind's like, oh, you could have done, and I struggle with that. So I appreciate you saying that. Like they're only gonna learn by me having some form of criticism as well, that they grow in their techniques or whatever the case may be, and trying to pass that along to the kids. Like this isn't quite there yet, but you're doing, giving them the positive, though you're doing a great job and I'm proud of you for doing this. It's not quite there yet, having some form of a little bit of criticism, something for them to build on. I think that's great. And even having, I'm looking at maybe hosting a bad art night, like the worst art, is what I want to do, because then that takes away that pressure, of I have to create something perfect for somebody's visual eye. No, I want you to create what you think might be the worst thing ever. And then I want people to judge it, like who had the worst art? Like that's the title that you're going to come across. And, using all the scrap material that I have for the scrap, you know, items, and see what we can create with the bad art. Like that's what I want to start with. Okay, we're going to start with bad art, first, and you just let loose and go wild with this, and then you can start working towards talking about the tricks, techniques, building something out of it, to keep people interested in being creative in a form like that. So I think that's what I think that I want to start with like the kids in my library. If for you that don't know, like Valeria, that I'm the director of the library here in Gregory. And so just next year's summer reading theme is color your world. So I'm already gathering things for next year of things you can do, and being creative and art, and that really strikes me. So the different ways that we can do that, how we see, art, and how we can use that word color, like we were talking with in a junk journal, just starting with the word, what's your favorite color, or pick a color and expound upon that. So
Well, along
I
those,
appreciate you saying that, with the kids not getting just automatic praises and pats on the head, that we're also there to be the educators and help them in growing to learn, and so it's not just an automatically, wow, that's great, and they go on with life thinking they did the best piece of art they ever did, because that's what is expected of you as an adult to a child, like, oh, that's so good, and giving them that, whether you think so or not, give them a positive, but also giving them something to grow on. So
along those lines too, Taro, another thing I've noticed is like, even if you think it's good, I think the important thing is to have them to discover, do they think it's good? What are they doing? And along those lines, one of the things I found is useful is to ask questions. Well,
yeah,
what were you trying to express here?
yeah.
And after you finished it, what did you think you expressed? How did you express that? What were the struggles that you had, to get to that place? And in the film industry, there's a common saying, there's always more film on the floor than on the screen, and if you ever go to anybody who's really creative, you'll see they have junk all over the place because they can't keep up with the pace of ideas once they get going. And so being able to like see something and then go away from it and come back and see it again to discover, like, oh, when I put these, it's one thing to say, hey, here's your color wheel and make this work. It's another thing to say, here are some colors, tell me what happened when you put those colors together. We like to tell kids at the beginning, don't put all the colors together, because then you'll just have black. And then and I'm saying, no, don't tell them that. Give them the colors and then ask them what happens when you mix all the colors together. Because if they discover it, they got it. If I tell them, it's just a list of things that they have to remember, like a history class and dates or something. But to me, the discovery is a really big part of of the challenge of creativity, to try to do something and see something different, to send them out, or even just the internal parts of their head. What did you feel when you said that? Right? And then ask their classmates, what did you feel when they say that? What did you think he or she meant when they said that? You know, communication is a 50-50 thing. I say something, you hear something different than I said. Just like the pool shot, you have to bank it sometimes to get it in the hole, you know? So to me, those are the things that start to build creativity. How about you guys? What do you think are some of the ways that we can that creativity can be enhanced and encouraged? Let's be creative now.
So, well, it's been a while since I taught a creative writing class, but something that I always like to start with is having fun with language. And we've kind of talked about that here a little bit about that language is arbitrary, right? There's you can put it together in so many ways. It may not be grammatically correct, but you could still put it together in many ways. So I start with college freshmen typically, but I start with imitation. So bringing in a poem and asking students to imitate that and then make it their own, right? Other things I do is I cut out lines of poems and then just kind of dump them on the table, and then students kind of gather whatever lines they want and put them together, right? But that's to illustrate that there's this arbitrary relationship between meaning and language sometimes. And it what I've found is it helps them understand that language is there for you to have fun with. It's there for you to communicate ideas. And it doesn't matter if it's your own language, right? You can use someone else's language to do that as well. So that's my 2 cents. Kind of starting, kind of getting into the weeds a little bit rather than the overview of everything. If that makes sense. Sorry.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you another question though on that to follow up. What kinds of practices have you seen other than the ones you just stated, which, you know, kudos for that. But what are the kinds of things that you do to encourage students to be their own teachers? You know, to encourage students to want to know, to discover, and then to find excitement. Not only are you not resisting being creative because you're thinking, well, nobody may like that. And we do too much of that, I think. It's like saying, well, I don't know if that's going to sell. Nobody knows if it's going to sell. And it may not sell in your lifetime, and then another lifetime, nobody can get enough of it. So you don't really know. So what do you do to encourage self-discovery and self-teaching?
Well, one thing and just with any type of teaching that I do is personal examples is really important to me, and I think they're important to students. So one thing that I'll do is I'll bring a piece of a poem that I wrote maybe early in my career, right? And just kind of explain like, well, I wasn't necessarily confident here, and then I would present something later in my career and say, these are the differences. This is what I've learned between this time, right? Uh, and just, I think illustrating to students that there is growth. You're not going to, I mean, some people will just come out of the gate and be amazing, but most of the time it takes work. It's not just something that comes naturally to a lot of people. So also in something that's also been mentioned here is just giving students permission to be themselves, which I know is really difficult to do, but I think they're more willing to do that if you are willing to show who you are through your own work.
I like to include mistakes in front of students, and to be able to demonstrate how it's okay. It's like notice no nosebleed. You know, it's like after I made that really goofy statement, you know, my ears didn't pop or nothing, you know, just went on. And I'm, you know, it's most of the mistakes we make are very cheap, and we can learn from them if we value them. Tracy, did you have something? Stacy, did you have something you want to say?
I was just going to toss out there. I think in listening to both what Tara and Joshua are saying, I think a lot can be said for experiential learning, like learning by doing, and it can start small, just little bitty things. And then they grow themselves into like, I can do this. I can absolutely do this. And then they share that with their peers, and everything just grows exponentially.
Well, and something you said that really it rings another important bell is surrounding yourself with other people who are interested in discovery, you know, finding friends and being open, because those people, especially if they can be critical, and you know they love you already, I mean, on some other level, or you hope you do. And so, you know, it's like some things that people that you know that love you can say to you that other people who feel like a threat, you don't want them to say that to you or act in a certain way. You feel threatened. Be nice to get over all of that. But the thing is, you know, other people who are trying to discover things and who are trying to do new things and be creative, if you're surrounded by creative people, you will be more creative, because everybody's giving you permission, and not only permission, they demand that you be creative. And if you'll notice that the people that we look to most as examples of creativity, they're rarely hermits. You know, they have small groups that, you know, they're, you know, but I mean, of inner circle people, because Dunbar's numbers says that it's only going to be so many of them anyway. But they have other people, you know, and in lots of interesting little circles. And you, after you look, like I say, in art history, you start to learn how many of those people were together. All of the scientists, the people who are doing, you know, made the really leaps in science, they have societies that they get together, and they challenge each other's ideas, especially in science. That's what it's all about. Is I say something and people just say, oh no, Diggs, you're really way off here, man. That can't even be possible. How could that be possible? You know, but it's that kind of exchange and putting stress on ideas, and putting stress on our even efforts that make us creative. And that's why I think, you know, a program like what Valerie is doing can bring some of those people together who are also interested in being creative. Before we go on, any other ideas about how we might encourage the people around us to be more creative? Anybody else?
You were talking about the language that we use too, and that came to mind too. And Joshua was talking about the poetry and changing it, you know, adapting things to the language of, you know, our adolescence then, because what we see as poetry, they might, you know, if we change it, say, hey, let's make a rap today, you know, like, and explaining like, look at the lyrics of this rap, you know, and doing a side by side with a poem, like, what do you notice that's different, you know, what's the same, you know, doing that. Creativity is, oh my gosh, just the different genres of creativity that you can expound upon. So you're thinking creative writing and they have music in their head, you know, they might need to sit there and have a beat to write to, you know, like just anything. I think getting the exposure out there, thinking outside the box on our own of, you know, okay, like I'm not 10 years old anymore. I'm not 13, you know, I'm not a teenage, whatever. I'm not these things. I might feel something from my youth, but how can I flip this on my head as a educator and adult and getting that exposure and using maybe some different language to trick them into being, like trick them into being creative by saying, okay, today we're going to, study rap, but in actuality, we're going to be studying poetry, and creative writing. That's what we're going to do when we do that. So I think that that's something that we need to think about when we're thinking into that adolescent area too, that language that we use, and not using that, okay, today we're going to be creative. Like, what does that mean to you? Like, here's one form of being creative, and tricking them into actually doing it. And I think, like you said, that exposure, then they might say, hey, I can do this, and then run with it, just giving them different opportunities like that. They might not have paint at a canvas, at home. So giving them that to do, and like, oh, this is really cool, but something they have to work towards to earn money to build up their art supplies at home, or whatever the case might be. So
Valerie,
Yeah. So one thing that is always at the forefront of my mind with adolescents is that for everyone, there are moments when we're feeling or thinking something that we don't have words for. But for adolescents, it's more frequent as they're building their vocabulary and learning ways to express themselves. And so expressive arts and poetry can unlock something that they can express in a way that they weren't able to with words. And then when I think of educational or creative activity in a group, I think of it on like two axes, that activities can be simple or complex. And then they can also be superficial or profound. And so some simple activities end up being so profound. I watched the breaking competition in the Olympics last week, and this is an athletic art like rhythmic gymnastics or synchronized swimming, and it's simple. All it takes is a refrigerator box and some moves. But it's very profound. And, and over the past 40, 50 years, it's been a way to work out conflict, to express the whole range of human emotions. And so thinking about youth and just the point of their life where they're at, where they like to move, they like to be active. And they have these complex feelings and thoughts that they can express in different ways if they're allowed to, if they're given the opportunities. So.
I would be remiss if I didn't plug a very good book called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. If you haven't read that book, it's actually a dictionary. And when we talk about creativity, and you were mentioning that, often we don't have words, that dictionary was based around trying to either find or create words for feelings that we have that we don't have words for, to help people to express that. And it was so popular in the prison that it became currency. People would take other people's copies of it, and trade it for, 2 packs of coffee or something like that. So it is, I think the book makes the statement about what you were just saying, Valeria, is that, sometimes we don't have a way to say, and maybe there are no words that actually express that, so we express it in another way. And creativity is not just about expressing those emotions, though certainly that's important. It's also about being able to see and use the parts of the tangible physical universe, not to mention our imagination, in different ways, to reconstruct, to put the molecules of existence together in different ways, and to make new things and to encourage new ideas. So those are opportunities that I think programs like the one you're doing present to us. Tell us a little bit about, to state the obvious, what are some of the benefits of doing this for young people? What does it do for them and for us as the overall society, having young people who are creative?
Yeah, well, it gives them an outlet for sure, and a better sense of self, where if they're able to find their voice and express it in a way that is able to, that other people it resounds with other people, that gives kids a more solid sense of self as they grow older. And just also with their enhanced powers of expression in their relationships too, it can help to improve things. So one of the kids at the camp, I know him outside of school, and he was lamenting, outside of work, and he was lamenting that that he needs a new pair of shoes, but he had mentioned it to his dad, and his dad immediately rejected it. But he didn't realize he needed some help thinking it through, like how to articulate that he needed that pair of shoes. And so, these are like very basic things, but with being able to express themselves, then it's a form of like regulating your emotions, and also just being able to solve problems that might seem intractable. So,
well, we're down to our last couple of minutes, but if you can give us maybe an example of how getting young people who haven't met each other before together, can you tell us about any benefits from that?
Benefits from young people who haven't met each other getting together?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Especially from different cultures.
Yeah. So they learn from each other. They learn about like different programs that they're in. Friendships to adolescents mean so much. They're at an age where their friends start to mean more to them than their families. And they're learning the balance between that as well. But just being able to feel feel at ease and safe around a group of friends means the world to an adolescent. And so outside of work, I know a lot of kids through a youth program that my friends and my husband, we facilitate. So it takes a while for them to be comfortable with each other, but they're growing up together too. So something that might set a kid off to make them disengage a year ago, this year they're just doing fine with the same scenarios, and and that includes interpersonal scenarios. So yeah.
Well, we have actually come to a very quick hour, and there's so much more to that this is just kind of like almost like a warm-up. It's a big subject, creativity, and it's something that human beings really need to create. And what I find with young people, if they don't have a way to create, they will find a way to destroy. So it's important to create lots of opportunities for them to create. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time, this same time, same station on Thursdays, 10:30 Central Standard Time. Goodbye.
Thank you.